I'm back. Where am I? Let's talk about it. We'll talk about spot market, freight rates, I don't know, whatever you want right after this. Yes. Good morning. It has been a minute. And I understand if you're upset, but you shouldn't be upset because I am nobody. I am nothing to you. So what I do on the YouTube should not matter too much. But we're here. I'm thankful that you're here. It's been kind of hectic. 2 weeks ago, I had probably the biggest week I've ever had dispatching. Like $37,000 in 1 week with about 6 drivers. So and what else? And then last week I think I booked 18 loads between 5 drivers. It was a crazy week. We've been running a lot of short stuff, and that's harder, right? It would be easier to dispatch trucks, here's a 1,500-mile run, and it gives me a couple of days to prepare ahead. But I don't do that. We try to run the short game. Short game works sometimes, most of the time. At times, I guess it should be the better thing to say. But the struggles I've had, well, first of all, I wasn't. See, I'm different than some of the other YouTubers. Like I'm not going to get up and do a rant for 4 hours of somebody I disagree with, right? I'm not going to do that. So I can't do that. I don't have the energy or the gumption to do that. I'm a live and let live person. Now, there are some trucking YouTuber influencers that you probably should take with a grain of salt because I know a lot of things in the background, and so I know a lot of the untruths that they'll say. And so, and I've tried to confine my little space in this world to just reporting the news, not even the news per se, but just the load boards, because that's what I do all day. Business comes first, right? And that's why I started early today, because I wanted to make sure I got this out of the way, get my algorithms back up. I did go live last Saturday on the guitar, but no one watches those. But I wanted to get back in the algorithm. I do have a few things I want to say, because there is a lot of talk whether it's worth it to come to the spot market and all that. And and here's the perspective, right? Am I going to tell you that spot market is the greatest thing ever? No. Is it a way to achieve some kind of freedom? Yeah, but here's the caveat to that. Most of the people struggling in the spot market is because they have their own limitations, right? So you don't have the freedom that you probably enjoyed a couple of years ago. This is the longest freight recession I've seen since I've been doing this. But there's still money to be made. And that proof is in the pudding with when I'm looking at the TMS system, right? The TMS, tells me who the top 5 drivers are and what they're making and how they're doing it, right? So I have this aerial view, right? And whenever Freight Waves and DAT come up with their articles about, this is what's going on, this is what, I've already seen that because I have this aerial view. I'm getting phone calls from drivers outside of the company that are dealing with certain things, and then the load boards. Here's the thing with the load boards. When you're going off a DAT or 123, that's a different market per se. But when you're doing like CH Robinson, RTS, Nolan, TQL, they all have their old Echo, Ryan. I already said Ryan. They all have their own internal load boards, and then you have the Parade, which you can usually access that from the load boards. But think about Facebook, right? Think about Facebook or YouTube. Their algorithms are meant to kind of push you into a direction, right? So if I do a search for, say, guitar pedals, okay, because I'm a guitar player, all of a sudden all my ads in Facebook are guitar related things, right? And same thing. Like one time I was looking up a camper for somebody. I wasn't even shopping for it. Boom! Now all my Facebook feeds is nothing but campers. And what it does is it tries to push you. It tries to teach you. It tries to manipulate you into an algorithm that gets you to buy something, right? And YouTube is no different. And the load boards are doing the same thing, right? So if we can sit there and say the 30-day or 15-day average is here, and you can't seem to get that number, then you're pushed a little bit lower, right? But then like you take boards like Sage Robinson RTS, their algorithms learn your specific profile. Okay, this guy tends to book at the last minute, or this guy tends to book way ahead, or this particular account tends to book these particular loads, right? And what the algorithm's doing is it's teaching you what their limitations are. For example, Uber Freight tends to pay better at the last minute, right? You're not booking a week ahead with Uber, and their lumped together loads are worthless because a lot of times you can't make that work time wise. They pretty much all will pay better at the last minute, but it depends on the customer whether they want to take that risk or not, right? So with the amount of illegal drivers that we've been seeing, like in New York State, they were finding licenses or CDLs that had no name given as the top name, no name given on the license itself, on these non-domicile CDLs. Those are the ones that are taking these impossible to do loads. You guys seen it in the truck stop. You've seen them switching their signs. You see them switching their signs in their insurance companies like you change your underwear. And so the algorithms in these computer-based load boards are matching that, right? So the computer tells Walmart, hey, we can move these loads that are 800 miles in one day, blah, blah, blah. And so they schedule accordingly. And so what happens is this is all you're seeing for a minute. And now we're finally starting to see a readjustment of these kind of things. And So anyways, those tend to pay better. So you got a lot of carriers that are like, oh man, I can't quite make that delivery, but I'm going to grab this load and then just fake a tire blowout or something like that. And that's where these fines on the rate con say $150 fine, $180 fine, or if you're not tracking because no one's good at their updates, then we're going to fine, we're do $100 bonus if you do this, $100 bonus if you do this, $100, and what it is that they're forcing you through fines and manipulation to use the tracking apps. And so what that does is it creates more information for the algorithms and the AI to do more dynamic type pricing. So there's a lot of, like Jeff did a video the other day, people were asking, how do you negotiate? People ask me that all the time. And I think I'm going to do a video about negotiations with computers, because when you figure out each platform's algorithms, then you can kind of manipulate that. Like, I just told you that Uber pays at the last minute. There was a time in my own truck where I was sitting there in Springfield. I was one of the convenience stores that had truck parking. And all of a sudden this load popped up on Uber. It was a pallet load paying like $1,500 to go like 200 miles, but it had to be picked up in 15 minutes. And I'm looking at the time, like, I can make that. Click, boom. And there was another one where I made $5 a mile, picking up a load of charcoal going to, in Branson going to Denton, Texas. That was an easy load. And then I grabbed a quick water load from Uber back, but those were all last minute deals. I was literally in the dock in Denton. I saw that water load, click. I was on my way. And see, and when Uber first started, here's more proof of this. When Uber first started, they wanted you to use the app. If you use the app, you got $2 a mile plus $150 for truck order not use on your deadhead, as long as you were using the app. You got your detention paid right away as long as you were using the app. They encourage you to use the app because they were developing algorithm systems to be able to price and move freight accordingly and learn the habits of each carrier on how good they perform, how on time they were, and what can be done, so they can go to Procter & Gamble and say, hey, we can move these loads at this price and we could do it in this time. And that's literally the world that we're living in. That's how much the spot market has changed in the short time I've been doing this dispatch stuff. Now, I've been self-dispatching since 2014. Landstar, and then Schneider, and then the spot market. But, Schneider, it's the same thing. Schneider, the algorithms teach the drivers of what they're kind of manipulating drivers, what they need to move, right? So they'll throw money in some areas and they'll take money out of other areas. So their company drivers will take them more. And this is something I'm seeing more and more and more as we get into it. C.H. Robinson is now using AI to call you on the check calls for updates. And so if I was working for any of these big brokerages, I would be worried about that. Because, like look at TQL, like, you should see my list of agents at TQL and the TMS system. It's pretty long. You work with a different person almost every single time. And then you have people that work over there that all they do is just like, check calls and all that. Well, now AI is doing that. Stuff that used to be outsourced to like India and Pakistan are now being AI. So learning these platforms and learning the algorithms is important. And if you sit there like, well, that rate's too low, tough. You can either book the load or don't, because the shipper's like, hey, if you can't get it moved today, you've got a month to move this. And so when you call on loads on the dashboard, half the time you're put on hold forever. Half the time they won't even answer the phone. Half the time it goes to voicemail, but there's no room left on the voicemail box. And these are the challenges that I'm having, because I can still get good rates here and there. But a lot of the other challenges that we encounter is a lot of it with ourselves, because you got to have a tight operation as far as knowing where your money is going, knowing your expenses, knowing your costs, right? The second thing is you need to work as efficiently as possible. Know your clock. Know how to utilize and maximize your hours of service. If you got an open window to an open window on your load times and unload times, earliest to earliest. I mean, that's how the Schneider Finance guys survive over at Schneider, is they're picking these dropping hooks that you can go and deliver early at the earliest part of the window. Because the earlier you can be empty, the more opportunities you have to book a load. Because after 2 or 3 o'clock, man, the load boards die down quickly. And I'm going to show you some from Friday. And Friday volumes are always lower than everything else. It used to be a few years ago that the Friday 3 o'clock shuffle, man, you can make some bank, especially if it was right before a holiday. Now it's like you better be booked up, or you're fighting all the algorithms, all the other drivers on Monday morning, which is what I've been essentially doing. Because if you book too far ahead, the algorithms say, okay, we can keep this lower because this person tends to always book lower, because they want to book ahead. I know of a driver that was 2 weeks ahead all the time doing nothing but CH Robinson. And I literally called him. I said, dude, this is the amount of money you're leaving on the table. That guy's out of business now. So, I mean, it's a balance, right? It's a balance of what you're willing to do. And there's 3 levels. When you call a broker or you play with the computer, you get what you want, you get what you need, you get what you can. And the more specific load that you need, it's get what you can. If you're a driver that's sitting in St. Louis, Missouri, and you absolutely have to go to Seattle, Washington, then guess what? If there's only 4 choices and 3 of them aren't answering their phone, you're going to lose the opportunity to get home to Seattle if for $50, $100. That's a get what you can scenario. Now you have the luxury to sit around and wait a couple of days or whatever, then you have the luxury, and then you can probably get closer to what you need. And the other big problem is I think a lot of drivers don't realize what they need. You don't realize, because you're not doing your numbers, that you've been running at a loss for the last year. And then when maintenance comes up or a mishap occurs with the truck, then you're sitting there like, how come my maintenance fund isn't full? By the way, shout out to the coffee drinkers. So I've been wanting to get that out. Okay. That's what you're up against, right? There's still money to be made in the spot market. However, you got to be on your A game right now, and you got to be doing things that you're not comfortable doing. That's it. If I still have my truck right now, I'd be going to certain areas that I normally wouldn't go. I would be out probably 25 to 28 days a month instead of the 20 that I usually ran. And that's just it, right? So, well, I had a thought, and I'm going to keep it there. So, anyways, let's go to the comments. I appreciate you guys coming in. This will not be a long live feed, I think. Let me take a look at my dispatch queue. Yeah, I think we got a little bit of time today. So, Schmitty Trucker, good morning. Grafton, what's up? Cheap Free Hauler, good morning. Jerome Jones, member for 30 months. Thank you for your membership. I appreciate you, sir. Good morning, Snorelord and everyone. Music City Transport, how you doing? Good morning from Denver. Wow. Greetings, French. Good morning, Jerome. Says Cheap Free Hauler. Buck Brown, and my talk to text is at its best already. See, 4 hours to receiver, 3 hours drive time. Guess I'm stuck outside of Atlanta for another 2 hours. Maybe I'll miss most of the morning rush, right? Jerome, it's been great, but I've been pulling flatbed the last 2 weeks. Well, good morning, all. Gen Z, haven't spent a night in the truck in over a month, running short under 200 miles. When I deliver this morning, I'll be at 6,700 for what I loaded Monday afternoon to delivering this morning. That's good. Shannon, with her very cheerful self. Good morning, everybody. Charity, what's up? We'd all like to welcome Charity to the list of international owners. The algorithm isn't designed to help carriers. That is something that was told to me years ago. Remember, you guys remember a YouTuber named Big Yeti? Matt and I used to talk all the time as his carrier was starting. This is before the Ike Stevens debacle, whatever happened there. And he went to one of the first like broker carrier summits that FreightWaves put out. And he came back defeated, right? He had this whole different mental outlook when he came back from that and said all this information is designed to go against the carriers. And so now obviously I don't know if his carrier is still around, but obviously he was able to build the carrier still. But here's the thing. Knowing these things, knowing that this was coming down the line, you have to recognize that, well, the importance will be relationships. The importance will be finding the niche stuff, and Cheap Freight Hauler will agree with this, that doesn't require the normal algorithms that could be manipulated through the dry van market, right? Now, the challenge is getting to those, and it could be direct shippers or brokers that have direct shippers. There's a lot of times that a direct shipper will start a brokerage just to move their stuff. Pepsi is a great example of that. Walmart is now a brokerage moving their own stuff. So a lot of deals, a lot of freight rates are decided on the golf courses, at the luncheons, on phone conversations, relationships. That's kind of old school trucking in a way. Those are the things that you need to seek out if you want to avoid this algorithm AI monster that we're now feeding, right? But you're absolutely right. They're not designed to help carriers. They're only, look, the shippers want to move their stuff as cheap as possible, especially after 2020 when they got hammered on rates. And so in an effort to keep these customers happy, they're going to do everything in their power to feed that. CDN's been telling you that all, for a long time. A lot of people will blame brokers for these low rates, but the brokers are showing record profits somewhere, but a lot of that is because they're laying off people. Now, I'm not defending brokerages at all, but I'm just saying that there's more to the story than just the brokers keeping too much money. Because we see the money change in 2 days. Like there was a load that I put a bid on C.H. Robinson, and they didn't come up to my bid at all. So I ended up covering the truck somewhere else. Well, 2 days later, and the low must have got pushed because it was a ridiculously low rate. The low must have got pushed forward until it had to move. And then by coincidence, I had a truck in the same area 2 days later, a different truck, And I look on there my offers, and there's the load I offered on. It's a day later than what it showed, but click, I booked it. That's the thing. These computers and AI platforms are getting a lot of things wrong. I had a load that paid $800 for 100 miles because the computer told the brokerage on their platform that that was a 380-mile run, when in reality it was 100 something. And as they get rid of their workforce, you're getting less and less humans that would catch that. And now I'm seeing buzz on Facebook about AI dispatching. So imagine you're a fleet manager for like Prime or somebody like that, and you're managing like however many trucks are on your particular board, like let's say 20. What if you could do computers to do half your work as a load planner? And that's coming down the line too. All this information is being used against you. That was the whole purpose of electronic logging systems. So they know where every truck is. Think about Google Maps, right? When you turn on the traffic of Google Maps, that's going off of everybody's locations and how fast they're moving. And so when you look at a state on Google Maps, if you see roads that don't show green until you zoom in, that's because there's less traffic there. So think about every single semi, except for the exempt ones, which isn't many. The ELDs and the information that's putting out, and then the Project 44s and the macro points, and then the RXO and RTS and Allen Lunt having their own apps. That's all that's for. Yeah, it's for tracking, but it's learning you. It's manipulating you. It's utilizing your information to get the best possible lowest rate ever. And so when I'm bidding on a load, and you see it with JB Hunt all the time, when I'm bidding on a load and my need is 2,000, my want is 2,500, and they're at 13 and someone's bid 14 on it, I can't compete against that. Well, who's taking it for 14? Do they know their numbers? Do they realize this is a losing game? Or did they have a load that paid so well that they're able to take this hit? Or maybe they need it specifically to get their driver home. That's what you're up against. Or maybe the time was impossible and someone grabbed that because they're willing to unplug their ELD. They're willing to change the sign out front, on the side of the truck there. And so this is what you're up against. And so if you're not on your A game on your operation, you have very little chance of success because you have so many things up against you. And so the quicker you realize that, the quicker you face that fact, then you can get to fixing things, then you can get to making money. If your truck expenses are too high, figure that out. Right? But how many loads are not getting covered till the last minute? There's a lot of loads that, like there was a load I was looking at going to it was Springfield to Memphis, something like that. And ridiculously low. So I contacted my person and wheeled and dealed, like, nope, the computer won't let me for another 2 hours even ask for more money. An hour later, those loads were gone, never to be reposted. Someone took that ridiculously low rate, or the loads just disappeared. A lot of stuff's getting rescheduled. A lot of stuff is like, yeah, it's supposed to be here tomorrow, but you get there, it's not until next week. because somebody miscommunicated with somebody. Does anybody post their truck on data or any broker apps? I will if I need something specific. And I know it's going to be a challenge. Like if I got to get a truck to Phoenix and I know they're going to be in Chicago, I'll post the truck. I won't post it on DAT because if you post on DAT, what's going to happen is TQL is going to call you. And a lot of times they'll call the carrier, not you. Right? So, Red Lady, good morning. Thank you for your membership. Anytime I post my truck, all I get is TQL calls for loads going the opposite way where I was supposed to go, right? Is it worse than when I parked in June, Arizona Sidewinder? It depends on why you parked the truck. Now, I can show you, let's see. Let me go to DAT trend lines here. Now, are you in van? So if I show this chart, right? There's a trend up, right? It went down and then suddenly there's a spike in October. But dude, we're only 3 days into October, right? So you got to take these numbers with a grain of salt. That's van. That's flatbed. They're all showing a spike because we're only 3 days into it. So it depends. If you know it, Arizona Sidewinder, if your name is showing where you live, that is a beast that I have not been able to conquer. I have a truck that lives in Phoenix, and I've been struggling with this truck. And I found that the best strategy is to just take a punch to the face coming out. Luckily, Arizona rates have gotten a little bit better in the last 6 months. But getting out to Arizona, that's another challenge that doesn't pay well. So, it just, so it's I don't know what worse means. I mean, in your context. Because like I said, 2 weeks ago, I booked $37,000 worth of freight. And none of that was my furniture stuff, by the way. My multi-stop stuff. Well, no, there was one, but it was only like $3,700. So it just depends. And then how much money you're spending to park the truck. Are you still doing insurance and all that stuff, So SST, what's up? Other trucker James Best, what's your opinion on AI? I haven't been able to book a load yet when AI answers. Depending on the platform, like most of the time, if you just kind of irritate the AI, then you'll get a real human. Right? So I'm trying to think of the brokerage. There's one that's a chat bot that you text. And you could tell it's all formal, and then suddenly you can see when the real person kicks in because they're using slang and yo and all that stuff, right? And this is how insane AI's gotten. I called on a load. This person spoke perfectly crystal clear English with an Alabama accent, and I could hear typing noises. And I sniffed it out. It was AI. And then when you ask, is this AI? It'll go, yes, sir. I'm blah, 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 blah. It'll tell you, yeah, it's for efficiency. And then what you do is you give it some gray answer. It has to go to a human. So, that's so and that's like negotiation is completely different now. Because, for example, if I see a pattern on an AI platform such as like Sage Robinson RTS, if you go over a certain amount, like say $200 over their asking amount, it'll automatically say F you in the AI kind of language by not even giving you a counter. Or the low will just disappear off the board. And I've had a couple of brokers tell me, yes, that's what it's designed to do. That's the digital version of you call on a load and you tell the broker some insane number and they hang up on you. That's literally the digital AI version of that. And so what I figured out is certain platforms, okay, if I know if I go over 200 over, so what if I do 190 or 180 or an odd number like 179? Then it's got to think a little bit. But most of the time I'm still dealing with the human. The algorithm sets up the conversation and then I'll go direct, like for example, CH, I go to a person. Echo, I go to a person. Arrive, I go to a person. I use their platforms, try my number first, and then I text the person saying, hey, I put a bid on blah, 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 blah. What can you do? Because here's the good thing about all this. There's negotiation tactic about setting the anchor first, right? Some people will say you set the anchor first, and other people will say they should set the anchor first. Well, anytime that you see a price, they're setting the anchor first. And what I have noticed is that like RXO, they won't have even a number there if that load has to move. Or if it's going into or in or from an unstable market. Well, what do you mean by unstable market? Well, you take the entire state of Texas, it has 3 or 4 different markets. You have the Lubbock, you have Dallas, you have Laredo, you have Houston, you have Amarillo. One market is going to perform better than the other, right? And so, like when Georgia was getting insane on their outbound, the computers were picking that up. So they want you to set the anchor first. Thing is, if you go too high, it's automatically just going to go default to their lowest rate, and then you got to talk to a person. So the people relationship is still important, but you're going to find that a lot of times their hands are tied. Well, the computer says I can only do this for this amount of time. Get back with me in an hour and a half, and we could probably get close to your rate because the load will have to move at that point. Well, people are so desperate that load's gone by then, or I've got the truck covered because I don't mess around. I think I only stay on hold for 5 minutes if someone puts me on hold, unless it's a load I really, 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 really need. So that's what I mean. If you go back to the beginning of the video, I was talking about the AI stuff, right? Driver work is where it's at. Driver unloads, multiple stops, being professional, presentable, and remembering trucking don't care about your feelings. That's true. I've seen that firsthand. There's always someone to do it cheaper. Most often I'll come back because the cheapest option isn't always the best, right? Truman says, I'll keep my company job home every weekend, anytime I want off. 2,500 to 3K average week works for me. Good deal, Truman. Mark is a member. Thank you for your membership. Good morning. I've noticed Ryan is creating lanes for me that I previously ran on their app. Yeah. Good luck negotiating with Ryan, though. They won't even give me $100 a lot of times. And they're another one like TQL that has 58 different agents. But there is a guy that I do have a couple of go-to guys. And so when you go to their website and you put a bid, what I also do is I'll email that quoting at Ryan Trans. I'll email them, hey, I've got a bid on this. Because what's happening is when you put a bid in on their board, it automatically goes to someone that is basically the default person for it could be a different person that day. I had one of the Ryan guys explain that to me. He goes, yeah, it normally goes to so and so, but he's not in, so that's why it was taking forever to get back to you. But yeah, and sometimes if I can talk to the person, I'll get my 150 bucks more than what I asked, or less than what I asked for. I get close to my rate. Ryan is more of a convenience, because I can see the times. I can't see the customers like you can with Uber, but you can at least see the times. And when you're trying to book loads at 5 and 6 in the morning, that's valuable. You was in Landstar. Okay. Landstar is a different beast because you're only making 65% unless you have your own trailer. And the trick at Landstar is to get into the logistics side that, the show freight or the hazmat and or the multiple stop hazmat, that kind of thing. That's where you kind of can shelter yourself from that. But if you're getting from agents that just get it from other low boards, the co-brokering agents, then yeah, that's a losing game in my book, especially with these rates. The lower rates are not due to economic recession based markers. They're due to bad actors in the industry that operate at subpar standards. I could profit too if I hire a non-domicile, pay penny. Right, correct. I know a guy that doesn't have a load board account. He just pulls off a CHR. He's picking up in Ohio, Georgia today for $2 a mile. He says load boards are too expensive. And they are. Well, DAT just raised their rates again. When I first started using DAT, I think I was at like 50, 60 bucks a month. Now my subscription is 119. 123 load board raised their rates, but only one time in the last 8 years. Whereas DAT seems to do it every year. Oh, but you get the 15-day average. Now, Yahoo, because the 15-day average doesn't mean squat when they're not willing to pay. Flock Freight uses AI now. Truck with T-Bone. Heck yeah, Alabama accent for the win. Good morning, everyone. It's a different kind of negotiation. You can no longer provide value for your rate request. Right. You can't sit there and say, well, it used to be I can get on Samsara and go like, oh, I can give you the tracking link, and my driver's good about sending PODs and BOL, blah 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 blah. I could sell, right? Now it's like, if you don't use our tracking app, 150 bucks. If you don't send us the POD, you don't get paid. Like they're not waiting on the driver anymore. Shannon says hit the like, so do what she says. Yes, I love how every one of our support services keep raising rates, but we can't, right? Did the Alabama AI yell roll tide on the phone? I don't know. It was a very lovely lady with a nice accent, very polite, until I said, is this AI? Yes, sir. She didn't say I say that's how you can tell it's AI. If they don't use ums and uhs, and now the AI is like, well, I need to start using ums and when they start doing that, it's over with. They even have typing noises for heaven's sake. So now, all hope is not lost, right? You just got to learn the system. You just got to learn the system. That's how it rolls, right? That's how it rolls. You've had AI use ums and now they're just wasting time. Stop telling it the secrets to passing better, right? Was to say, oh man, I'm sorry. You guys, here. This is off topic here for a sec. Well, kind of. Do you remember like 5 years ago, the trend on YouTube was to do reaction videos? that was AI learning human reactions, because there was a time that if you had AI create a video or a picture, it was very cold. Like they didn't like, remember when you couldn't, they couldn't even do hands. AI pictures couldn't even do hands right. It was like always like 5 or 6 or 7 fingers or whatever. And it can't do words yet really well, depending on what level you're at, right? But it was using, and if you did a reaction video, I think Cannell was doing a bunch of reaction videos because he was in that algorithm, because it was feeding, it was teaching us to make into making reaction videos so we can learn what human reactions look like. And CDN, he made a podcast with AI using 2 people that even had laughter. And it's going to be harder and harder to sniff out. It's crazy. And we live in a world where if I call a broker and they're not, and they're very polite, I'm like, this might be AI. Because I can't tell you how many times I call on a load and I can't understand the person, or they answer rudely like I just stepped on their cat. Yeah. Is this such and such transport? Yeah. I'm looking at this load. Da da da. Oh yeah, it's blah blah blah. And and it's like, dude, if you hate your job, quit. Right? Barring a black swan, I think 26 should see considerable improvement overall. Theoretically, yes. And the non-domicile CDL thing should start making a dent. But man, that's a lot. Like, all they got to do is set up one afternoon. They're taking out 200 trucks. That doesn't even make a dent. Now I'm starting to see Raycon saying that you have to show an American CDL, no non-domicile CDLs, right? Or they want proof of your CDL, right? USA Truck raised their percentage pay on their loads up to 80%. First load 70, second load 75, every third load after that 80. Why do they got to complicate the numbers like that? Confuse and distort is the goal. The King's Pack binds them. Create ways to see without seeing. They cannot show themselves or speak to us. Create ways to speak without speaking. That's crazy. I wouldn't have connected the two. Are the rates really down, or are we just hanging on to the virus highs? If we look back before the ELD mandate and virus high rates, are they any lower? That's a great question. And here's the thing. What's putting owner operators out of business is not the rates per se. And I'll point at James Best. When James Best first came over to Like Trucking, we had a minimum of $3,000 a week booked rate that we had to do because Jeff needed people that ran. And $3,000 was easy. It's still easy. However, you can't live off that $3,000 now because the expenses are too high. Trucks that don't have warranties are taking people out. Huge expenses are taking people out. If you're running primarily in the Northeast and you're not paying attention to your toll numbers, it's taking you out. The $300 labor rates in some of these shops, that's what's taking you out. The inability to be flexible when you're in a bad market is taking you out. The inability to run your ELD as efficient as possible and do the things that no one else wants to do is taking you out. It's the expenses. It's the, when you're making $4 a mile on long miles on everything, like we were a few years ago, it's easy to be sloppy. It's easy to be non-efficient. Like when I was at Schneider, I could book these open 24-hour to 24-hour window loads, and I didn't have to hustle because my expenses were literally a third of whatever of the Schneider finance guys. So I could afford the, if a load cancel, it wasn't a big deal. Well, there's 15 more I can choose from. Because I stayed in the right areas, it was easy. Too easy. And so when things are tighter on your profit and loss, you got to be more on your A game. You know, you have to drive the truck. Right. And but knowing the numbers, like you could be like, if you don't truly know your numbers, you could be running for 2 years. Next thing you know, like, you get that one repair and it maxes out your credit card and you're like, oh crap. This ain't working. Or you think you're doing well until you have to replace the truck. I saw this at Landstar all the time. These guys would pay off trucks. They're like, oh, they'd run very casually because that was the goal. That was my goal at one time. Have the payoff truck, I can run casually. Right? But what's happened is you're not running enough to make replacement money or repair money. So whenever the truck took a dump, then they would get another truck, and now they have a truck payment. Suddenly, they had to run more, but they didn't want to run more, and then they end up going out of business. I saw it over and over and over at Landstar, and I see it all the time in the spot market. Now, I didn't work on truck replacement because I knew I was getting out of the truck. So that made my last 2 years very easy. But I still knew my numbers. I still ran as efficiently as possible. Provost Motorsports, yo, all trucks sold and gone due to health. Man, you should have a conversation with me sometime soon, Provost. I haven't talked to you in a while. I miss you. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope you get to feeling better and start healing. So it's not the rates per se that's taking you out. It's what advantage can you get over the rest of the crew, right? Because if you're sitting at a truck stop right now, look at all the trucks around you. Every single one has a different need. You might have a Swift dry van, and then you have, a tanker with a long hood, and then you might have an oversized next to that guy. And everybody has a different platform, a different way of doing things. And so what you do is you pick out, okay, we already know Swift's advantage, right? Their size, they've got huge overhead, but they got huge resources, right? So they can compensate for any loss. But that one truck flatbedder with the big hood sitting there, he might have the best looking truck in the lot, but he might be in huge debt. He might sit there for 2 or 3 days looking for a load. You never know. And so what you do is you find the people that don't seem to be fazed by the current market conditions and talk to them. Because I've got brokers emailing us constantly all day looking for trucks on loads that I never see on a load board. Perfect example is FedEx Ground. They are a brokerage. Did you guys know that? Probably not. I once saw one of their loads. I was sitting in Springfield looking for a shorty, and they had a good paying one. And we needed to be set up. So Jeff set it up, and it was an insane carrier packet. Jeff was irritated at it. And ever since then, man, we get a ton of their emails. And they're good paying loads. And they don't seem to be having a problem moving them, because I never, ever, hardly, that was the only time I've ever seen a FedEx Like I remember looking at the load board, I'm like, wow, that's FedEx, huh? That's weird. Click. Let's call them up. And but it's not like you see them posted. So those loads are moving somehow, right? And like there's some John Deere stuff out of a certain area. And I talked to the broker that has that and like, oh yeah, we've seen a big decrease in their loads. Meanwhile, I'm looking at FedEx, they got them all. So, and you gotta understand the brokers are slicing their each other's throats also. And a lot of them are using these 3PLs where they're getting them from a bigger like broker board and the lowest bidder wins. A lot of flatbed moves like that. Paid for truck, still paying the payment just to the business savings. There you go. Because after a year, if you don't have any major incidents, then you can use that for a down payment towards something else with the warranty. Or you can buy an aftermarket warranty. You know. It's a challenge, right? It's the expenses are the challenge. So, anyways, let's go to load availability, and then we're going to end this live feed here pretty soon. This is the 123 low board. I am given a compensation to promote it, but I do use this low board. I use the load availability mark. Let's do this for van, and I also use the market rates. And I've compared the market rates to DAT. They're pretty much in line. There was a time where they weren't, but now they are. Looks like Washington's yellow instead of red, so Nevada's yellow instead of red. Arizona's yellow. Let's take a look at since Sidewinder's in here. Let's look at Arizona here. Now, there's different methods. If I'm looking for long haul, your highest rate will get you those first. And these are posted rates. A lot of brokers, especially at the last minute, aren't posting their rates because they want you to set the anchor, right? $1.90 to go to South Carolina. It's actually not bad. $1.77 to Indiana. That's to go to a good market. Now, it's more miles, but check this out. $1.77 a mile to go to Plainfield, Indiana, out of Chandler, and it's only 3,800 pounds. Or you got this one that's 5,200 pounds going to Idaho. It's paying $2.20 a mile. So if you're caught up on the rate per mile, you're like, oh, this Idaho load's better. However, what are you going to get out of Idaho? So we click on this. We scroll down. Backhauls. Big fat zeros all the way down. And we can go to DAT and look at Idaho. Well, there's actually more out than in here. There's 100 out of 72. But obviously, 100 out of the whole entire state of Idaho, who are you going to be fighting for that? Whereas Plainfield, Indiana, making the same amount of money, gross rate, less per mile, but it's almost 400 miles more. This is still below my cost per day that I've set up. But look at all the backhauls. 537 going from Plainfield, Indiana to anywhere. So which one are you going to choose? Right? Because let's say you book ahead and you do get a load out of Idaho. And so you take that Idaho run. Well, what if it cancels? And trust me, cancellations are through the roof. I have zero faith that until the driver texts me and says, I'm in a dock, I have zero faith that that load's going to be good. I mean, that's where we're at. That's how shell-shocked I am. Now, here's 42,000 to go to Faribault, Minnesota. $1.65 a mile, $2,600. Almost 1,600 miles. That one going to Indiana pays better, and it's light. So is this a good load? No. How much below? But even though it says 2% above my cost per day. Let's look at Minnesota's outbound. 15, 16. We go over here. Minnesota is showing more out than in, so that's good. So, you know, so that there's Arizona, right? So they're yellow. Let's go to Illinois. Now, highest rate will get us the long haul, but highest rate per mile, we find the short haul or the long hauls that are paying really well. Of course, you got Axle that always does this, $25 a mile. It's actually 285 miles. They're probably at 712, not 7125. I could be like some influencers, like, look, there's still money in the spot market. Look at that. But we're not doing that. Now, this one's interesting. 2,700 to go from Edwardsville to Arkansas, 446 miles. Let's click on this. I bet you this is multiple stop. Yep, 3 extra stops. So depending on how many days this takes and how many true miles it is, that's where AI can't handle that. AI can't give you that information. It hasn't learned that stuff yet. Here we go. Joel at the Battle Creek, Michigan. Not bad. 850 for 176 miles. Oh, it's hazmat though. That's why. Plated van going to Iowa. Rochelle to Burlington, 186 miles. Supposed to pick up today at 9 a.m. Now this was posted 18 minutes ago. So this is your last minute deal, right? Average is about 700. Rate checks at 694. Cargo chief's got it at 698. This needs to move, and you need to have a plate trailer. So there you go. So I try to keep the trucks in areas where I know I could book last minute and not have a problem. And it sucks when like Ohio suddenly drops off and I don't have that strategy anymore. And it's kind of nice when the Southeast is on fire because I can kind of keep that, right? TJ, what's up? Snow is coming to Idaho too. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. Chase the Indiana load. Chose the Indiana load over South Carolina or Idaho, right? Here's another one. So obviously there's a trend of paying a little bit better going to Iowa out of some of these brokers. Okay, well, I wonder why. And so we go over to, let's pick this one in Iowa. Let's see what our outbound looks like here. There's 3. So Iowa's a little bit lower on here. Let's see what Iowa's doing here. Let's refresh this. 437 in and 420 out. There you go. See, recognizing that is important. Oh wow, that's an insanely like people fresh to the spot market that don't know anything about anything. Oh, dude, I just got 350 a mile going to Miami. Yep, you sure did. Good job. And then they find out why. Then they sit there for 2 days in shell shock because they're not running for $1 a mile and they're afraid to deadhead 600 miles to go at least grab something coming up. That's only paying $1.20 a mile. Right? Meanwhile, the Georgia, Florida people that we have here, they're running that all the time, and they're going up, and their rate per day is on par, and they're usually the best earners in the company, even over my trucks, right? So learning to recognize that. Now here's one: Cicero, Illinois to Wasson, Ohio. Now, if you have a very timid driver that doesn't like Chicago, you probably don't want to give them this load. Cicero is it'll take you twice as long to get anywhere, right? But I know that. I know the area. But if you're willing to deal with Chicago, then you can get this good rate. And then Ohio is always usually, well, let's take a look. Let's not make a liar out of me. Let's look at our outbound. Quite a few. 217 going anywhere. 100 40 alone going right back to Cicero. $5 above my cost per day. The other feature I like here real quick is this Joliet to Leroy, New York. Well, what part of New York is that? That's not the city, is it? At 370 mile, it just might be. Nope. You can kind of, whoops. You can kind of, yeah, it's over there by Rochester. That's actually a good load. I wonder what's up with it. 2 extra stops. There you go. That's why. But this would be a good weekend run. Does it pick up? Yeah, it picks up today. Delivered all by Monday. That might be good. Oh, I wasn't showing the screen. I'm sorry. Durr. All right. Of course, this would be my load home. Moni, Illinois to Hazelwood, Missouri. That's St. Louis market. That's not till the 13th, though. But they're already up. So I also look for that, too. If the loads that they're posting that ahead of time are up a little bit, then they're expecting rates to go up a little bit. And it's automotive, so the customer might be like, okay, we've got a little bit more bankroll to move these things, right? Southeast fire has been put out until March. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, let's take a look at that. So let's go to that. Let's look at Georgia right now. 17.0 in, 13.58 out. Florida, 17.44 in, 7.11 out. So there's more outbound. I mean, I've seen this number as high as 2,000 and then this number as low as 200 coming out of the entire state of Florida on the DAP board, right? Look at Illinois, Indiana. Missouri's got more out or more in than out. That's not good. Look at North Dakota. What's going on in North Dakota? There's 192 outbound. Let's take a look. Let's see if someone's spamming their board. Yep. Yep. TQL and Engineered Logistics are posting a bunch of repeat stuff. And so that's why you got to take these numbers with a grain of salt, right? Because these are all multiple postings for one load usually. Obviously, TQL's got a hold of a shipper over there. And it's not just TQL that does that. A lot of them are doing it now. BVB Freight is another one that does it all the time. So you got to take these numbers with a grain of salt, right? So there's your van. Let's look at reefer here. 4065 if you want to try this code out. You want to try this load board out for free for 30 days. Don't take my word for it. Maybe you'll do it and like Steve doesn't know what he's talking about, which is fine. I hope that if there's something that I've said that you disagree with, I hope that you do a 4-hour video on how wrong I am. because that's a lot of attention. That's a lot of energy. And it's nice having someone have that much energy towards me. Let's see. New Mexico's green reefer. Let's see. Let's take a look. What's coming out in New Mexico? Of course, highest paying thing. Well, highest rate per mile is going to Denver, of course. Spring Hill, Florida. Denver, Florida. $248 a mile to go to Florida. $237 to go to Florida. New Jersey, $220 a mile. So these two loads are almost identical in mileage. The Florida one's heavier, 42,000 pounds, whereas New Jersey is 30,000. Monroe Township, that's going to be Costco, more than likely. Right? So that's a quick unload, but you got some tolls on that one. Let's look at this because it's right off the toll road. Toll cost is $300. Right? So you're looking at $4,600. Now, Port St. Lucie, Florida is paying more per mile. It's heavier. Mileage is quite, like a 40-mile difference. No tolls. So the profit on this is $29.68, whereas the profit on the New Jersey is $24.67. That toll took that profit margin out. But are you going to get a better rate outbound out of Jersey or out of Florida? Both are considered dead, areas for rate wise. Now you're going to have more volume coming out in New Jersey. So, but let's say you got a dedicated customer in Jersey. So you're not even worried about that. Right? Delivering Louisville Monday, never had luck. I do pretty good out of Louisville. Speaking of Louisville, I got to get a truck over there. So that's reefer. All right, let's look at flatbed, step deck. I appreciate everybody coming in. Oh, look at that. Southeast, as usual. Alabama alone's got 1455 outbound. So if we let's go to DAT. Let's do dashboard here. Let's put this on flatbed. Take out vans here. Alabama's got 2600 coming out. Look, I've said it over and over and over like a redundant broken record or a CD that skips. Southeast is where you're making your money. And if you can do a northwest to southeast and constantly do that, then you could probably make some money. Consistent money, not just spikes. But you can pretty much run the I-10, I-20 corridor and make coin. So that's all there is to it. And it could be short daily runs too. So anyways, 48065 if you want to try the low board for yourself. The other feature that I use all the time, I literally have this on my second screen all day long, is the market rates. Because they give me the mileage, the tolls, like from Phoenix, Arizona, Alpena, Michigan, you're looking at $94 in tolls. This toll calculator has been pretty accurate from my experience. And their ratios are not much different than what DAT's showing. So, but anyways, and it give you history. Like this is a kind of a volatile market. You can kind of see that. And this goes back several years. So if you look at in 21, this was at 52. And then in 22, it was down to 36. So that's a volatile market, right? Whereas if we do, say, let's do St. Louis. Actually, no, let's do Edwardsville, Illinois to Columbus, Ohio. Oops, Columbus. I know this lane pretty good. Let's look at our history here. Yeah, in 22, everything took a dump, but not much. I mean, 1620. It's that 1620 that set the bar, right, in 21. Then after that, it's kind of steadier. 23, there's a little bit of a spike, but it's a more flatline adjustment, right? So it's not as volatile. And then you can literally reverse this, and you can find your consistent lanes this way. Looks like it pays a little bit more at one point, but then it pays a little bit less going back. But if you only need 700 per day, then you can go back and forth, just run I-70 like it owes you money, and you're good to go. And you'll consistently run in the two good freight markets. So anyways, thanks for watching. I appreciate everybody. Straight for sale for tomorrow. You'll be all right. You'll be okay. Make sure you subscribe to my Snorelord OG, where I talk about other stuff other than trucking, and then every now and then play my guitar a little bit. So, anyways, peace. Listen to the song. Listen to the song.